I've been waiting so many years to attack my favorite faction, the Dark Mechanicus, and Horus Heresy has finally given us Plastic Mechanicus, and I've pretty much said anytime Games Workshop wants to send us stuff, make sure it's Horus Heresy, we'll make a video on it. So we're gonna make a video on it. It's time for me to finally do Dark Mechanicus. I've been waiting for bespoke minis for so long that I've just gone, screw it, let's customize them. But I wanted to see what everyone here at Tabletop Time thought they could do with Dark Mechanicus. So we're gonna make some robots. Yeah. Robot. Ew.
Now, I've decided to go and build one of these Thalax?
It's a Thalax.
It's a Thalax.
Do you know anything about them?
No.
Let me tell you a little bit about them. So this is my special interest. Thalax are cybernetic constructs of the Mechanicum. They're not quite servitors and they're not quite Skitari. They basically have had their emotion logic centers. Logic center of the brain, fine, emotion center carved out. So they're like cyborgs, kind of like Robocop, where a bunch of their sort of functions to be a soldier, combat machine, they can't. They're kind of organs in like a suspended fluid. But they still have the ability to act. They're kind of like, yeah, they're pretty cool.
Cool, I'm gonna do one of them. And I'm gonna choose the big gun. Big gun looks cool. And then I'm going to basically assemble most of the model and then work out what additions or changes I want to do for my conversion, for my flavoring. And I think I'm just gonna paint the head differently. I was thinking of swapping it out, then I realized that it's got this big dome. It kind of looks like a fish tank. So I thought, what if I paint it like a transparent fish tank? And there's just like this weird fleshy skull visible through it. And then just like the amniotic liquid is sort of like up to here on its face. That would be really freaky. And I think it would be really cool. So that's what I'm gonna do for that. And then I think just a whole lot of loose cables and mechadendrites just sort of cascading down off it. I don't know anything else. Like, you just saw real time how little I know about these guys. So I'm gonna have a bit of a dabble, a bit of a scrunge around and make something just really cool. So enough said, I think I'm just gonna start building. All right, I need to talk about something. I just stuck the arms on this guy, and I want to say something. I really hate in Warhammer kits how the gun is basically two arms and they're all loose attached to the gun, and you need to wobble everything into place, attach to the torso, attach each wrist to the gun, and it's just a juggling nightmare. I hate it. This one has the tabs, the slot tabs for every joint. The firing wrist is affixed to the gun. That's kind of standard now. But then you got a pin in each shoulder and one on the other arm. That made it really easy to line up. I still fumbled it the first time, but then the second time just went straight in. I like it, I think. If you wanted to really customize the model, you could just cut the tabs off and then you've got the full mobility. That's really cool. I like that a lot more than the monopose kits that we're getting a lot of these days. Thumbs up from me so far. All right, I've had to think about what I want to do to really change up the overall composition and aesthetic of the model to make it a lot more dark Mechanicus. I found we had this old box of Necron, and I was looking at the very end, you got the blades again. I was like, yeah, maybe. But then I saw the end of the Gorst rifles, the Gorst blasters. I thought that would make a really good swap for the nozzles on the, I guess that's like the Space Marine jetpack that these guys have got. But these have got like 1950s Rocket Man conical thrusters. They look very, very cute and comical. So I thought if I swap them with these spiky bits, then it's gonna look really, really grim and gothic. That might work really well. So I'm gonna do that. I think I'm just gonna add like just lots of like looping cables all over the gun, draping off the miniature. And I think that'll be the last of the conversions I do. The rest will be in the paint job.
So it's finally my turn to build up some Dark Mechanicus guys, and I've chosen to make a couple of thralls. I'm excited to start this project because I've never done Dark Mechanicus before, but I do think there's a very cool vibe to it, so I'm excited to kitbash some stuff together and see what we come up with. So let's do it. So whenever I kitbash something, the first thing I do is try my best to build the original model, and while building it, think about the different parts or pieces that I could use to make it more into what I want it to be at the end. And there's a ton of models and inspiration that I can use from our previous Warhammer kits that were kindly sent in by Games Workshop that I can use to put on these guys. So with my first dude, I built this guy up pretty much as was on the box, as I really wanted to keep my first conversion nice and simple. Murray had suggested using a skull skull as one of the heads, and Dave and I both agreed that this was very Dark Mechanicus, so I had to give it a shot. I grabbed one of the skulls from the Citadel kit and glued it onto his face, just clipping off some excess so it fit nice and snug. Next up, I grabbed this box from Blackstone Fortress that we have, and there's a couple of these like acro-flagellant guys in here, and I thought that they would work really well. So I clipped the arm off of one of them, which has this kind of like taser looking weapon, and glued this onto his right arm. Once this guy had both his head and arms attached, I just wanted to add a little bit of flair to him. These cables that came from the Blackstone Fortress box were also incredibly useful. I clipped these off and placed them around his head so it looked like he had cables flying out the backside. And then I just popped him on his base, and my first thrall was all done. Moving on to my second thrall, I had a little bit of confidence to add a bit more. Again, just starting with a body for the base, and then incorporating some other pieces. David found this head from a Warhammer Underworlds box, and he really liked it, so I thought using it for this guy could work really well. It's nice to know these models in particular are built very much arm, head, leg, so you can pick and change the pieces that you want to use. This meant that I could clip out the head of this guy from this Warhammer Underworlds faction, trim him up a little bit, and just shove him into the hole. I like to think that the massive chain on his side is actually keeping his head in place, and without it, his head would just topple and fall off of his body. To add to his silhouette, I decided to give him a knife again from the Blackstone Fortress box, and this would be for his right arm. And then I also added in some more cables to the back to hide in any of the gaps, but also create a better silhouette. And with that, this guy was pretty much done, and I'm moving on to my third thrall. For my last thrall, again, I can't understate how awesome this Blackstone Fortress box has been. I clipped off one of the heads that had all of the cables on it and shoved it into this guy's neck hole. We also had this really cool Necromunda model lying around that had a couple of different surgical guns and pieces to it that I wanted to use for one of my models. So I took the needle off of this original model and popped it onto my thrall. Again, just adding in a couple of cables from the Blackstone Fortress kit to hide any gaps and give him a better silhouette. And with that, these guys are pretty much done and are ready for their coat of primer and to paint up. So my Dark Mechanicus guys are all built up, and I have sprayed them Chaos Black as well, just for their prime, and I'm gonna paint these guys up now. And I can't help but feel that there's a really good meme here. It's like me and the boys looking for beans at 2 a.m. They're just guys. They're just weird Mechanicus guys.
Now it's my turn to tackle the Mechanicum, and I've wanted to collect these guys for like, wow, 10 years. Horus Heresy 1.0. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for Dark Mechanicus, but it doesn't seem like it's happening, as I mentioned. So I'm diving in, and I have to attack the model I've really wanted for the longest time, which is the Castellax Battle Automata. I love the Thalax. Tech Thralls are cool, but the Castellax has always been the model that's drawn me into this faction. So I'm going to do one of those in plastic, and I'm going to start building it normally and then sort of see where my creative energy takes me. So reviewing the kit, the Castellax kit is incredibly complicated. It's something I've noticed more and more with Games Workshop kits is the quality of the builds are increasing. And if you enjoy building complex kits like me, they're actually getting more and more fun, because the upside to these more complicated builds with more small pieces is the finished result has way less mold lines, and mold line removal is something I actually hate doing, so it's just a win for me. The pieces do go together well, but you do have to follow the instructions closely because it's a bit fiddly and confusing where some pieces go, but once you've got it, they kind of just go together. And with the core of the Castellax built pretty quickly and the torso and legs done, I'm starting to think about how I can customize it. And the arms is the obvious choice. So as I put things together to make my Dark Mechanicus Castellax Battle Automata, I have a weird line I need to draw where I don't want to change too much. There actually aren't that many model kits out there that are really compatible with this yet, but I also want to change just enough so it feels like a Dark Mechanicus variant. And conveniently, Games Workshop actually also sent us this Necromunda box, Hive Secundus, which is the box they showed off that has the Spyra guys in the exosuits and the Van Sar. And there's a lot of Van Sar bits I think are going to be perfect for this to sort of sell my nautical theme for my Dark Forge. So I'm looking at these crab claw pieces, and they're about the right size for Castellax hands. So I'm going to see how they work and try and convert them across, add some like Cthulhu-esque tentacles. I think it'll work pretty well. So the most important thing for this to work is for me to get a nice stable connection point between the arms and the wrists. So I'm actually going to pin these. I use a drill to drill in where the elbow would go and also the new claw hand. And I grab a bit of wire and basically make a bridging bit of metal. The great thing with this being robotic is this can be exposed. This can just be like a piston or a mechanical arm surface. And I don't need to hide this or anything later. I do feel weird about these Hive Spyra suits. They just don't quite quite feel 40k to me, but when taking them away from the context of Necromunda and making them a more esoteric and weird Dark Mechanicus claw for a robot in the 31st millennium, suddenly it all starts to piece together. I decided to go with the bolter weapon that is on top of these, rather than trying to retrofit the Castellax bolter, because the Castellax bolter is actually an Assault 3 short-range bolter, and I think the gun on the back of this claw is a better representation of that than what just looks like a standard bolter on the Castellax. I trim off some clips and I do manage to get the Castellax arm guards to fit over the claw, so altogether this makes it look like a pretty seamless addition to the Castellax, albeit a little bit more nautical and weird. I'm always a fan of non-destructive conversions, and what I love about this is those Spira hunters with the claws, they actually have 2 claw options, and I could use both the claws from this set and still be able to assemble those full suits using the power fist instead of the power talon, I think it's called. So it does mean that I haven't like cost the kit, that's still usable. I hate the idea of using super expensive Games Workshop kits in a way that you like can't salvage the rest of it. So the claws work really well here. A thing I do take that is destructive is the Necromunda mechanical ponytails. I've always disliked them. I think they look weird. And I make my Vansar without them if I ever use them. So I'm happy to just use these, and I'm going to use these as little tentacles. Charybdis has a squid as its iconography as well as a cog. So having these tendrils coming out from the front of the Castellax continues to add to the Dark Mechanicus feel, but also to the feel of my Dark Forge. And with those glued in, Jen said to me, hey, you should really do 3 points of conversion to make it look really different. So I decided to add a bunch of cables in a sort of a half cape flowing down one shoulder. I used some random Vansar thing from Hive Secundus. I have no idea what it is or what it's for or what I've just destroyed, but it worked, and I glued that on top of the shoulder. And then I used part of a Skitari's face, glued them together, and then just used some green stuff to fix some pipes together, and then drape a shawl over the back. A nice tattered shawl really adds to that dark, evil Mechanicum. They always have a lot of these robes and cloth elements, so that's a great little addition too. So as I put these last little bits of green stuff in place, I think it's time to call this conversion finished. Okay, green stuff is setting. Here is my little guy. We have some cool bits. I'm really happy with sort of what happened. Once I discovered or sort of realized that I could use those bits from the Necromunda box, it kind of changed the trajectory of the whole build. I've gone definitely for my Darkforged Charybdis. I've lent into the nautical vibes, tentacles in the form of cables, and also crab claws. And I think it's going to be really cool with a dark paint job. This is built. I've got to let the green stuff cure, go home, go to sleep, come back, and paint up my Dark Mechanicus Castellax. Did you know 1 in 1 hobbyist finds it difficult to get coffee to their mouth? Does your coffee leave a bad taste in your mouth when you're drinking it from regular, non-screwed up mugs? Well, we've got the solution for you. Introducing Coffee Bits, our brand new line of merch that supports tabletop time. Scientifically proven to improve your performance while making models and drinking coffee. This is not a scientific claim. Our Coffee Bits merch is available on the Tabletop Time website in shirt and mug form, so you can show off your love for coffee and tabletop modeling on the street or at the paint desk. Always confuse your paint water with coffee with our Tabletop Time Coffee Bits coffee mug. Available now. Do you get it? It's a sprue and it's coffee. This isn't a bit, this is real merch. Please buy some if you like it. It helps support the channel and lets us keep making videos. Shut up!
The first thing that springs to my mind when I'm painting an evil metallic henchman of the Dark Mechanicus is dark, grim, oily things. So that is the color palette I'm going to try and go with here. And to do this, I'm going to start off with a wine red, a Prussian blue, and a smoky gray that's almost a black. Then I'm going to mix these together into a concoction and heavily overbrush this over the entire model. Then I'll go back and just dab in parts of the pure red and blue into different spots, just to give variance and a bit of texture. And then I decided that wasn't enough, so I applied an olive green all over the place to add to that oily effect. Then the next major step, having done all my base tones, this will all form the foundation that everything else is going to go on top of, allowing it to show through. So with that being said, I'm going to start heavily dry brushing metal everywhere. I'm going to go and dry brush a really dark off brass onto all of the other metallic parts that I want to complement here, mostly along the big funky gun. And then when that's all done, I'm going to give the entire model a hearty coat and a dark green wash. This is really going to kick that oiliness into overdrive. It's time to add some pops of color. I'm going to go with, again, a really nice dark blood red and just give it some regimental stripes stripes over the place, specifically on the forearms and the shoulder pads. It's time to go in and work on the center point here, and that is the little faceplate, where I want to have a skull suspended in a creepy green fluid. So I'm going to start roughing together the shape of a skull, and then when I'm happy with that, I'm going to start properly rendering and highlighting it. My skull is looking really cool, but I wanted to add a little bit more zest to it. At the moment, it sort of just looks like there's a dead thing inside here, but I wanted to make it look like it's just alive. So I'm going to paint in an eye. And then when that's done, it's time to do the water effects. Since I purposefully put the head on at an angle, this will mean that the fluid inside is also going to create an interesting and more organic line to be more at odds with the more artificial silhouette around it. Once I've painted the surface of the water in a fairly off-green bony color, I'm going to go and just apply lots of vibrant green washes to the front plate, making sure to cover the skull and the top of the fluid. This will give the really murky green effect, like a fish tank that has not been cleaned in quite a few millennia. Then when that's dry, I'll just go in and re-highlight the top of the fluid. And for a bit of added pop, I'm going to highlight the top of the glass itself. I'm really happy with that, so now it's time to finish this off with just a simple glowing effect around the gun and finishing off the base to look like a really rustic desert. Bit of pigment to tie it all together, and we have my dark henchman stalking across this deserted wilderness.
So having my Dark Mechanicus thralls primed in black, it was time to bring a tiny bit of color to these guys. And this time around, I had opted to use metallics instead of using a non-metallic metal. Now, I've been out of the game for metallics for a little while, trying to paint it in instead, but for this project, I thought that working with some metallic paints could be a nice change. And when I think of Dark Mechanicus, I think grungy, dirty, oily, kind of something similar to what Murray had suggested before, but with a bit of a twist. I still wanted this faction to have some outstanding colors, or colors they would be known by aside from the metals, so I had to try and figure out a nice balance between metallics and these colors. But the first thing I wanted to do was establish what would be metallic and what wouldn't. In this paint job, I opted to use both a bronzy color and a silver, because I do think that Dark Mechanicus would have a lot of metallics in it. I'd then be weathering these down with a nun oil a bit later to bring out a grungy and grimy look. Now, I'll be honest, this paint scheme isn't something I would particularly draw myself to. My inspiration came from various sources. Dave and I had listened to a couple of audiobooks that had Mechanicus stuff in it, including one about a giant cabin machine. It was basically this huge machine that they had found, and it was slowly gaining sentience, and this poor dude basically got eviscerated because the machine found out he wanted to potentially kill it. Another source of inspiration that I had when trying to paint these guys up was thinking about machines and how there can be an evilness to some of them, how I would incorporate them in these models, and what sort of colors they would be. And while I'm not super versed in the Mechanicus style or paint scheme, I think that coming up with my own was still a lot of fun. Once I applied all my washes, it was time to start incorporating some colors, and I decided to go with a more muted palette, using some reds and some greens for the trousers and the plating on top. I then went ahead and started layer painting these up into a brighter color, and then moved on to all of the cables coming out of their backs, painting these in a lighter gray color, just so they stood out a little bit, but not too much. I then worked my way back and forth painting these guys up, adding on little touches here and there, but still trying to keep that grungy look about them. To finish things off, I had to come up with a base for them, and for me, Mechanicus always reminds me of the Martian Iron Earth from Citadel. The two pair really well, so in this circumstance, I decided to use that texture paste as well. Martian Iron Earth is really good because it's basically a crackle paint, so all you have to do is apply it and let it work its magic. Once that was done, all I need to do was trim the bases black, and these guys were pretty much done.
So the time has finally come. I am going to pick my paint scheme, and I've had a few over the history, but something I really wanted to see is some nice golds and brasses for the undersuit, and then going with a dark main color that would give some evil symbolism. Mechanicum color schemes usually incorporate orange or red as homage to Mars, but I wanted to go with orange because red is so common. By keeping the metallics brassy, it lends to an old nautical feel, which is really important for me because the Darkforged Charybdis, which I'm making, are themed around the Kraken and nautical things like that. So I want to keep those brass colors. And while 30k is fresh and pristine, if I ever do these for 40k, I might add some verdigris in there as well and make them look all overgrown and gross. By going over black with metallics and stippling in this way, you can build up a really good gradient that just looks worn, weathered, and kind of reminiscent of those old like tin toys you could buy, or a statue that's been sitting in a park square. I use this same stippling technique to create a nice, moody and textured material for all the painted surfaces, going for gray in many panels and then highlighting some sections with strips of that orange. The orange did, however, feel way too comical and didn't work, so I brought in some brown washes until I had brought down the brightness of that orange and blended it in with the rest of the model, ensuring it all had a nice moody feel. Here I could throw on some of the brand new transfers that are available in this kit, and I gotta say, I always love Mechanicus transfers because you can use them on pretty much any Imperial or Chaos vehicle. There's a lot of metallic on this model, so I did pick out a lot of cabling in silver and then wash it with a black. These need to be understated but just break up the big blocks of color, so I don't need to go too heavy-handed here. At this stage, I decided I needed to do some amendments and paint some more areas in that gray, mostly focused on the Darkfire lance. And I could move on to the energy, the pulsing red that I'm going to paint in all of these recesses glowing out of the gun, and also what looks like a rotary ammunition chamber. Who knows what energies create Darkfire lances, but whatever they are, it's got to look sinister. So I highlight towards the middle and then glaze with a watered down Blood Angel's red contrast just to give it a pop of saturation. I really love how with this paint scheme, the crab claws and the tentacles are evoking that sense of Charybdis. There's a little bit of something otherworldly that feels quite appropriate for the Dark Mechanicus during the Horus Heresy. This isn't full-blown crazy corruption like you might expect in 40k. These are the first augments, the first illegal amendments and changes to STCs that really mark out a Mechanicus that's starting to experiment around the fringes of what's okay. And as I paint the lenses green for a pop of contrast against that orange, and pick out some details such as the Mechanicus cog, I can look back and say I'm pretty happy with this paint scheme. I don't want to take it too much further because this is something I want to be able to paint on an entire army, and I think this stands out. I think it works really well as an army paint scheme. I'd say it's a step above. This is like, if you saw an army painted like this, you'd be pretty happy with it. So I'm pretty happy with it. And the best thing is it is manageable. So if I do choose to paint like an entire Mechanicum army like this, I can manage to do it without overtaxing myself. So that's where we're at. It's been so fun to finally realize some Dark Mechanicus, even if I had to do it on my own and customize it myself. I was hoping Games Workshop would have my back and make some really cool Dark Mechanicus things, but you never know, maybe they will one day. Games Workshop, please, 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 I have one request. Please remember that Dark Mechanicus are really cool because they experiment with xenotech, biology, and AI and illegal stuff. Please don't just make them all about demon worshipping. It's one aspect that's cool. Cramming demons into things as batteries is super metal. It's very Doom. But being basically slaves to demons is kind of lame for the cool tech faction. So just remember the xenotech and the crazy fringe science stuff. Yeah, please, thanks. But let's check out some reveals. Let's see what we've made. I think it's time for that. Thank you so much to all of our patrons for your support. As the world gets more difficult and ad revenue dries up, it is our patrons who allow us to keep working and running this channel. So we really do appreciate it. Your support means the world. And if you'd like to be involved in mini review or join our official Discord and have a chat to us, please do go down and check out the links in the description. And once again, thanks to Games Workshop for sending us these awesome kits we've had to play with today. How did you guys feel playing with Dark Mechanicus? My favorite faction.
It's fun. It's not something I've actually done before, that particular aesthetic. I'm usually a fan of like the more clean lines and stuff, so it was cool. I liked it.
Yeah, it was really fun. I would like to paint something bright and girly though.
Yeah, not really your jam, huh?
No, but it was fun. I really did enjoy it.
Grimdark is the place to be. Well, I was really surprised to be using the Hive Secundus box as well. I'm glad those little crab nippers came along and let my Forge World Charybdis creation come to life.
Yeah, that worked really well. That look works so much, that particular model works so much better for AdMech than Necromunda, randomly.
Yeah, the claws, yeah.
Take, maybe?
I don't love the, that's fine. The models work great somewhere else in 40k. This has been super fun. If you want to see more crazy Mechanicus constructs, I mean, I've said it for a while, I've got some knights that need to be corrupted. So, you know, there's plenty more we can do. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Oh, and if you, and if you like coffee and model kits as much as we do, check out our new merch. The Coffee Bits, supporting the channel, allows us to make cool stuff. So we really appreciate it. And I like my new shirt. It's brown like coffee. See you in the next video.